there we have these non-grotesque people.
Well,
what
it's a racist position. I'm sorry. I mean,
it's a what kind of position?
racist.
Racist? You mean?
Yes, I mean, if you find that some people are so different,
Yes.
they're just the way, the,
Well,
their
I'd
life
like,
is
I'd like to
different.
talk about that for a moment because, as I'm sure you know, and as Susan Sontag certainly knows, because you've written about this kind of thing in the arts, the Andy Warhol film and your famous essay on camp and so forth. For a lot of critics...
I never read about any film of Andy Warhol.
No, but I mean of the underground film and the non-establishment film and so forth and so on.
Well,
But,
I haven't written about that either, but I have opinions about it. I'll say.
Well, then let me ask the both of you. As you know, of course, for many, maybe most critics, establishment-type critics, let's say, the gradual and yet in some sense sudden and rather astonishing entrance and influence of people like Warhol and performers such as Viva, these people have started to very strongly influence the mainstream in filmmaking and in culture generally. Here they are. They used to be on the margins and on the fringes and were seen by a very limited type and number of people. And suddenly we find them in your film. And this upsets a lot of people. I'm being the devil's advocate here. You hear, why should we be interested in these people? What is the significance of this kind of person and of their characteristic experience for us? I think it's a question of some importance, and I'd like to hear what both of you have to say about that.
I disagree completely with you, Jack, because I think one of the things that I like best about Agnes's film is it's one of the few films that I've seen in a long time where I recognize real people. And far from being grotesque, as I say, one of the interesting things about the film is that there really are lots of people like this, and that the film shows them, whereas most people you see in movies have very little relation to real people. That isn't bad either. I mean, that's one of the conventions of art. The relation of art to real life is very complicated and very ambiguous.
Well, let me say again, I'm playing the devil's advocate here. For what it's worth, I
mean,
agree with
in the
you,
average
but-
Hollywood movie, you don't see real people, either mainstream
Exactly.
people or marginal people. You see
Well,
ideas that people have about what people are supposed to be, or the way people are supposed to be represented in
And
film.
also the language problem. Like people speak. I mean, you know, I'm not the best to speak. I'm not the best one to argue about the way of speaking.
Yes,
but
just
the
take-
way people speak in the real life
Yes.
is rarely represented in movies. I
Although
mean,
those barriers are being more and more broken down, aren't they? In film and
Well,
on
slowly.
stage and in
Sure,
literature.
it is about time.
Yeah.
I mean, just take a very simple thing like the fact that people traditionally in films don't interrupt each other when
Mhm.
they talk. You say your line, then the other person says
Yeah.
his line, and so on. Whereas everybody
Right.
interrupts
Well,
each other in
there
real
have been
life.
some pioneer directors who have tried to bring that in quite. Orson Welles, for example,
Yes.
I'm sure you remember,
Yes.
in Citizen Kane was almost the first Hollywood director I can think of who did that so well. But perhaps I think it would be interesting to bring your film in at this point, because I think it's the other side of the coin. In Miss Varda's film, we have Viva, we have Jerry Ragney, Jim Rado, very special people indeed, although very real people. Now, in your film, Duet for Cannibals, we have, on the other hand, people who on the surface appear to be in the mainstream. We have Bauer, who is some sort of political philosopher or pundit, professor, whatever he may be. You have the young man and his mistress. You have Bauer's wife. On the surface, John Kenneth Galbraith, Arthur Schlesinger, if you will. And yet, as the film develops, and as we get to know these people more and more, especially Bauer, especially the philosopher, the political scientist, whatever he is, we find that behind the seemingly normal or mainstream surface, there are convolutions and all sorts of interesting things that one would not see in the public dimension. So perhaps that is one point where these films come together.
Yes, well, in a sense, the older couple, Bauer and his wife, they're actors. I mean, in the story of the film, he's a political refugee, a political leader, if you will, and the wife is, his wife, from his Italian wife. But one of the possible ways of looking at the film is that this is that they're really actors, that this is the role that they're playing in this relation with the younger couple, and
they
that
draw,
you don't know
they draw
really
the
what
younger
they're
couple
like that you don't know
their,
what they're like at all, so that
Yeah.
the surface, while it's realistic, is not at all necessarily genuine.
And they carry this role-playing about as extremely far as one can.
Whereas the
Isn't that
younger couple
true?
is treated quite realistically. There are lots of people like that.
Well, even to the point of questioning what is life and what is death, you find Bauer and his wife shifting back and forth until one can hardly be certain at the very end of the film who is alive and who is dead. Now, this is really carrying role-playing to an extreme. So I think in both of these films you have people who are so caught up and involved with role-playing
No, but
on
I
very
don't think
different
it's true of
levels.
Agnes's film.
You don't think so?
I mean,
But
Well,
she
you
should
know,
say
don't they
much
want to
more
be
than-
stars, as you said?
I would say they want to be stars,
But
and
the
my
interesting
film is
thing
maybe
is-
about acting or not.
But the point
But
is that they are the same. If they were stars,
that's
they
what
would
I
be
mean.
themselves.
They're trying to be themselves, and they make it, I mean, clear enough and loud enough so they would become normal, real stars.
I think in Agnes's film, the people are actors, but what's interesting about them is that, you know, as actors, they're no different. They would act themselves. Whereas
They're on all the
It's
time.
They're
another
on all the
field
time.
of
That's right.
stories. Anyway, what I
Yeah.
like in Susan's story, it's about this, comment on dit this?
Vice.
Vice.
Yeah.
And
Poor-
it is really interesting. Well, yes, because it's the way, I mean, it's not the way you live, it's the way you intend to spoil people.